I look at the formation of the early church 2,000 years ago. The church was the most viral product of all time. It happened in a physical community. There were no product managers. And that is one of the most incredible things that I think we've seen in human history, is how something just grew in and of itself because of the inherent beauty and everything that it imbued in its values.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Patronage. I'm Amber Atherton, partner at Patron, and today I am joined by Henry Costa, the co-founder and CEO of Glorify, the #1 daily Christian worship app with over 2.2 million users. Henry and his co-founder Ed have raised $84 million in venture capital from firms like Andreessen Horowitz and SoftBank, and now employs 70 people. Very excited to have him on the show today. We are going to be diving into how you apply lessons from social and gaming into your product, growing engaged communities, and making good habits a routine. Enjoy. Very excited to dive into Glorify today and this incredible product that you've built that really does feel like a game. People can dive in no matter where they are on their faith journey, find a sense of community. Can we start by talking a bit about where your passion for connecting others came from?
I think it's something that I've always had innately, that's been driven out of me probably recently as we look at how technology has changed so dramatically in the last 20 plus years. And if we look at the stats around the young, although we're far more connected in a digital sense, we're far less connected in a real sense, and loneliness is on the rise. And that can be seen in the workplace. It can be seen in social settings. So the idea for me of using technology as a force for good in connecting people together to try and reverse some of those problems that we're seeing, so that technology really gives a very healthy balance to people's lives, so people can have meaningful connections as opposed to just superficial followings or likes or connections, but something that's meaningful and rooted, is a passion for me. And it's been a passion since I started out in my tech journey. And I'm one of my big driving forces around everything is using tech to drive positive societal change. And that's what we're doing, and communities right at the heart of that.
Amazing. For folks who are just listening and not watching the video, they might not be able to see the map of Africa behind you, which I know played a role in your story. Can you talk a bit about how you ended up in Africa and what sort of work you did there along that thread of convening people?
So Africa's been a huge part of my story. It's a big part of my life. I'm passionate about the continent. So my father is South African, and so I've got a lot of family down there. So I used to spend a lot of my school holidays with his family out there, and we used to travel around the continent since I was young. So I always had this kind of bug for the continent that I couldn't shake, and I decided to go to Tanzania and build a trucking company. And then on my way into doing that, and while I was researching it, I met someone in a bar who convinced me to join their founding team of a company called Jumo.world, which is a fintech business that provides financial services on feature phones, non-smartphones. Well, that's what it did do at the start. So insurance, savings, lending, all based on alternative sources of data for people who were unbanked by the Western banking model that didn't really apply to 80% of the African population. And so that's what we did. There were 5 of us, and we had this, amazing journey, all the strive, all the fun that a startup really should be. And I lived in Tanzania, Zambia, South Africa, operated in most of the sub-Saharan markets, and just adored it. And it was just operational heavy in a really tough environment. And that company did really well. We had amazing growth, and we were in the right place at the right time. We got first mover advantage. It was an incredibly exciting thing to be part of, and realizing some of the impact that you can drive with technology. Because prior to that, the only way that you could, if you didn't have an income statement, you didn't have a proof of address, you couldn't be part of the Western banking models, which had just been planted on Africa. So the majority of people, 70, 80% in a lot of countries, were excluded from that system. So they either had to go to loan sharks which is obviously not healthy and not sustainable, or they went to microfinance operations, which were predominantly non-profit funded. But the problem with them, it was low transaction volumes and quite small loans. So it was very hard to make it work in a commercial business, and you needed to walk a long way to get to the outlet or the branch where you could do that. And what we did was building it through your phone, because everyone has a phone, and the data that everyone had on the phone. We partnered with the telcos. We looked into that data and created scorecards around that. And it was essentially built on trust that if we give you a loan, you'll pay it back, because we believe that you want to get access to a bigger loan in the future. And we called them nano loans. They started at $2 and went to 200. And then we had savings products, insurance products, and a lot of the lending was to small businesses. And we would see these amazing stories of, now I can sell, instead of having to sell a pallet of tomatoes at my stall and then walk to go and get more, or to take out a loan to get more from the local microfinance branch, I could take a loan, buy 2 pallets, set them up, and then I can repay the loan that day, and I can just start selling in much more bulk. And so that small to medium enterprise or sole entrepreneur was really one of the bedrocks of what we built the business on.
Incredible. I well, maybe later in the show I'll give you a sample of my South African accent. Great country. Just amazing to hear how that time influenced you, and really sort of threads through to your story now of sort of empowering grassroots communities to come together. And actually, something that many people might not know about you is that you served in the special forces for a while. And I think the army really sets the bar when it comes to discipline, following a routine. Are there any habits that you've maintained from your time in the army? Obviously, a big part of what you're building now is helping people create these positive habits in their daily life. So just curious if there's any subtle ways in that it shaped how you've built the product, scaled the team.
Yeah, I mean, probably my wife would consider them all annoying habits, the ones that have lasted. My obsession with equipment husbandry and ensuring that all our kit and equipment is well maintained and cared for, and that everything is planned a little probably on the overkill side, just in case. So so much of that stays with you, and it stays with you in your almost in your DNA level, that it's and muscle memory, that sometimes you just don't necessarily think about it. But what the outputs of that experience for me was so great in terms of understanding who you really are as a person, because you're broken down in essence to nothing, and then over time built back up. And knowing that about yourself and knowing that about your formation and your foundations, I found so helpful, especially then taking that on into an African context, which is a high operational and logistics market and a really tough place to operate, where the learnings that operations were, the output of bad operations could be so critical in a military context that you taking that on into a business context, you just overplan for those ops to make sure everything's good, so the outcome is smooth. And that was just a big thing in everything that we did, because we really labored on the operational element in markets. And that was one of the reasons why we succeeded. And you might even say we went overboard. But I think that was important, given the importance of getting that right in the African context. And I think then, when I look at the recruitment element and how I've taken on a lot of those habits, and how we look at building teams and recruiting individuals and traits that we look for, what I was amazed in that time was over the selection process was how good the training team and the recruiters were in selecting the individuals that passed. So we had 100 people at the start of our course, and there were 4 that passed. And when I looked at the other 3, I just totally agreed with everything that the way that and the rationale they had come to picking those three and why the 96 at different various stages hadn't got through. And that was something that amazed me, because I assumed that when you're with and surrounded by everyone during this process, you know them far more. You would think, oh, but they're not going to see that. They're not going to see that flaw or that weakness. But I think when everyone's kind of broken down and everyone, really shows those little bits, they know which bits are fake, because everyone has elements of mistakes and everyone has elements of failures. It's impossible not to in that context. But which bits are ones that there's a red line that you can't go over, and which are the bits that actually that's fine and that's expected and that's tolerated, which I thought was amazing. So it's building up for me as I look into recruiting and team composition is the diversity of skill set within a team, and to make sure you've got people that are building the team up as opposed to almost fighting amongst each other because there's overlap of skill set, but people who all contribute in their own way. And team composition is a big thing for me, and I think super important. And then looking at, well, before I hire anyone, what are the red lines that, in terms of whether it's previous experience, character traits, have they been in certain sizes of business, etc., and then looking into what actually they've done and where they've led it, and creating those red line elements, because then I don't waste time. But when you're pushed by a recruiter to say, well, you've got to look at this person because if they haven't met those criteria, then we can move on to really filter it down, because you know what you need, and the more planning that you do around that, the easier the process is in the end. So I think a lot of it's been subjective and learning for me in a way, but trying to objectify it to help the rest of the team in that process all align on what we really want, and then finding the person who fulfills that criteria in the best way.
So interesting. I think, so many founders are followers of Jocko Willink and the mental toughness that you need, whether it's from the Navy SEALs or the Army, and how that contributes to your founder journey. Curious, how's that contributed? When you think about giving advice to other founders, how do you cultivate that sense of mental toughness, resilience? Because Glorify is your third startup now.
It's been a huge part of it, because I think it's a huge part of me, and I think the startups take, that journey takes all of you. There's nothing really left on the table or on the side. So anything that's impacted you until that date, you're going to take into that startup, the good things and the bad things. And for me, it was always trying to understand where I'm weak so I can hire people. I think it's quite easy to understand where you're strong, but where you're weak, so I can hire people to fill in those voids and to help me on the journey to make us a rounded team.
So let's just go back to 2019. So, today there are obviously many successful venture-backed social and content platforms, one's dedicated to gamers, different passionate communities, but you saw this opportunity within the Christian community that you felt was really underserved by technology. How did you go about validating that idea, and just the sort of initial idea?
Well, I think that the initial concept was just born out of my own personal frustration. So there was a problem for me and a data point of one. Being a Christian my whole life, family was very active in the local church, and always wanted to do something with it. And I was trying to do my daily quiet time with my wife, and we would sit down every morning. It was a really important time for us, but we were increasingly struggling. And we, finding the right guides, resources, where we were, interpretations, commentaries, it was just tricky. And I just turned to her and I said, there's got to be something that can help make this fun, make it enjoyable, and encourage us to do it. And that was the seed, really. And from that moment on, I looked into the market, and that was when I thought, wow, why is there nothing out there that's got the best teams working on this? And there was systemic issues within the Christian world about how things were funded. Either it was through individual churches, which meant you kept having to repeat technology and it was for a specific congregation, or it was donor funded, and often the staff would be subsidized. It would be essentially subsidized or taking a salary cut to do it in a mission backed business. So the best people and the best minds weren't addressing this huge problem. And that's what I tried to do, and build a team in the same way that you would build any business, and raise from the best VCs around to build the best company full of the best humans to solve a problem. And that problem, I found out through market research, wasn't just mine alone. It was something that, when I started speaking to friends and family, and then widen the net to people I didn't know, and then different geographies and I think there's a certain amount of, you don't have to do too many surveys to really get to start understanding what the picture lies. After you've done a few, the value add each new one comes in is actually kind of diminishing returns. But the first few are really eye-opening and interesting. And it just showed that my problem wasn't unique. And as I often say, is the Christian world is resource heavy, but UX light. And there's resources everywhere. And you can go on the internet and you can go on YouTube and you can find resources abundant. But how do you know where they're from? How do you know, are they tailored to you? Are they personalized to you? Are they bite-sized and curated into your journey in one place? And so that's what we do, is we create amazing content, but we also package it. And that packaging is the UX, to help people have a really streamlined and simple process that encourages them to do it. And hopefully they really enjoy it and find it fun.
I think, faith is such a personal journey. So being able to have a companion, app that's taking you through that is really special. So you met your first kind of co-founders in a bar. How did you and Ed, your co-founder of Glorify, meet?
So I met Ed. We did a company before Glorify called Grasp, which is in the HR tech space, all about connecting people within large organizations. And we were put in touch by a mutual friend. Ed was very young at that time. He was 18. I was probably 30. So it was about 6 years ago. And in our first meeting, Ed said, "Will you be my co-founder?" And I said, "Don't be daft." But I, helped out in an advisory position for about 6 months. And then we got on so well, and we were thinking about the same things together. We had a great balance of skill sets. And we were a really great complement to each other. And so we decided to do Grasp together, which was awesome. And that was a business we sold a couple of years ago. And then I told him about, this passion of mine of Glorify, and we started brainstorming and looking at the market together and realizing, the timing, not only was the idea good, but the timing was right now. And that's what we did.
It's just so crucial to get the timing right, because back in 2019, I guess part of this was the era of Hillsong, like these big sort of celebrity communities coming together in physical spaces. Just sort of, I guess it's just impossible to time the market perfectly, but you guys clearly felt like this was a good moment to bring in a more like delightful tech experience to what was happening in popular culture at the time, right?
Certainly. I think the timing was incredibly fortunate from a lot of ways, but also I think it could have been 5 years earlier. It could have, the market's crying out for it. I think the market's crying out for it more. It was more in 2019 than it was 5 years before, but there's a 15-year lag, or there was. We're seeing a lot of catch up now, but there was a 15-year lag between Christian tech and what was offered outside of that. And that's what was the bridge and the gap we were looking to really fill.
So I've heard that you're a fan of apps like Duolingo that have turned, language learning into a game. And we actually recently had them on the podcast. I'm curious, are there any other social products or games that you find inspiring in terms of creating this delightful user experience?
So many. I learned so much from seeing everything out there. I think in the sports industry, you've got amazing social and community products, whether that's Strava or Peloton, or where they've taken our innate competitiveness and built that into actually a rather awesome community. And so I really like what they're doing. If you look at Candy Crush, Sweet Capital were investors in ours, so it's been amazing to have access to them and how they built that. And obviously that's just wasn't it just an extraordinary success, and taking some of the learnings around that. Pokemon Go, because it's the blend of that physical and digital, and I think that's really important. I always see the future of Glorify to be a physical manifestation of an inherently digital product as well. And then I think looking at a lot of the Chinese companies and the Chinese UX, if we look at Alipay or WeChat, they're amazing. I'm always looking at that UX in China, and Connie Chan from A16Z, who's our GP there, has been amazingly helpful, and that's what she specializes in looking at some of the UX in China, what's worked really well there, and how we can bring that to the Western market.
Are there any specific insights you can share there that you've seen in the China market, or like the specific features that have inspired you recently in the app that you've now brought in?
Well, I think you can't go much past, when you're going into looking at China, is looking at WeChat, and what an incredible story that is, and trying to understand why that hasn't been done in the US market or in the Western market. Why is that true super app where you don't need another app on your phone? You could just operate with WeChat in China, but we don't have anything comparable. But we are starting to see some of the larger players move into that space. So I think that's really interesting to learn about that and how that operates. And then Alipay is a great example of its native gamification. It was all built around gamification, as opposed to gamification being an afterthought on top of it. So if we think of its tree that grows with you, that wasn't an afterthought. That was, everything else was built around that. And that's really powerful, because that becomes the central focus of everything that's done. And I think that's a really nice way of conceptualizing gamification, that it's right at the core of what you're building.
I love that. I mean, certainly how we see the world at Patron is that it's day one. It's built to feel like a game. There are core game loops. There is progression. There's everything that makes you feel like you're having a very fun, engaging, playful experience. And I think that is what's going to set this next generation of consumer social companies apart, is whether they are built from first principles day one to feel more like a game. And you obviously started like that, borrowing concepts from social and gaming, like streaks, to help users build their daily worship habits. I'm curious, like, how has your thinking evolved there from the individual experience versus the multiplayer experience? Because there's now this sort of plethora of other features within the app. It's not just about me like logging my streaks. Curious how you think about those two player experiences.
Well, I think the Christian faith is a really unique thing, in the fact that inherently it's a daily individual practice. Inherently, it's a communal practice. And inherently, it's an evangelistic practice, in the sense that it's the job of Christians to spread the word and grow the community. And I always talk about productizing those three features. And community is such a core pillar that, yes, it's important to practice it on your own, and that is a core part of the faith. But being able to support the community around you, be accountable to the community around you, and encourage the community around you, and learn from them, and worship with them, is also such a core thing. So we always were very intentional about building a product for the individual first, and then layering on the community element around a product that they were already engaging with.
And in the beginning, did the community live within the app, or where did you think about the home for the community being? Like on other social platforms, or just natively within the app?
I think natively within the app and around social channels. And when we grew in Latin America, we had amazing success, but primarily in Brazil. And seeing the communities that popped up around Glorify organically was just incredible. And they turned up in different digital platforms, different social platforms, within the app or in areas that surround the app. And that was really cool to see, because that was organic and not necessarily driven by us.
Because I think it's one of those challenging things where you need to prioritize where you architect and build the community. Should you prioritize engineering resources to put that within your experience gated within the app, or how does that live on a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, Instagram? So good to hear that. It sounds like you had the balance of the community organically talking about you on these other platforms, sharing screenshots, and then having a deeper connection with other users within the app. Is that right?
Where it sits all depends on so many pieces around, the individual product and what the products are doing. And for some products, it's brilliant for people to be speaking about it on other channels, because it's helping brand awareness, and it's gaining loyalty that's off platform as well. But for some, everything wants to be kept within the experience and pulling everyone into that experience. And I think both have their merits, but if it does sit off the platform, then you also want to know that it contributes to your core product. Otherwise, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of having an enormous TikTok audience if you never can convert them, or you never can drive enough awareness, or it's not actually leading to what you're inherently doing and where your business model lies. So each company, I think, is so different, but wherever you build community, it has to serve your primary core focus.
I think that's such an important point, because community can feel very nebulous and distracting. And unless you focus on, okay, building community within my app is going to contribute to session time, daily active users, then you can get just very distracted with just, I don't know, monitoring community growth numbers or engagement. And when it comes to your board meeting, you don't have anything tangible to say about the investment in that piece. But yeah, I guess its faith is incredibly social. And, in the same way that games bring people together, it feels like you both looking at social in a very different way. It's like building these tight-knit, engaged communities that are genuinely meaningful and purpose-led. I think for a younger generation, the old model of, Facebook, massive network, consumer product, social growth doesn't really seem to be working. So what's your take on this?
Well, are we seeing the unbundling, in of the social space? And I think the younger generation is far more discerning about what they download, whereas millennials and older millennials just thought, oh wow, this is cool, and jumped on it because it was new and it was innovative. And now that we're surrounded by them, the younger generation is much more discerning about what they go. They want it to be authentic. They want to be able to trust it. They want to know what's underneath it, who the team are they sustainable? Are they, all of the tenets around how it's been built is really important for them. And, coming back to what we were talking about earlier about loneliness growing, but connected. So are digital connections. And why are those two things growing where you would be hoping loneliness going down as connections were going up? And I think the future is about fostering, more engaged connections and real community, and community that is not just around a digital connection, but it's around a communication. It's around a depth of communication that is above and beyond the superficial conversations that are happening even on the messenger platforms. And often we can do that when we build platforms that are more specific to a specific niche, because there's a commonality that people are there for. There's an interest that people are there for, that they want to dive deeper in and connect on a deeper level with around a commonality of interest. Now, faith is such a big one for that, because it immediately opens up a layer of depth beyond just sharing a meme. Yeah, as fun as sharing memes are.
Yeah. We all love a meme, but I think the foundations of having utility and belonging are just so important in community building. And I couldn't agree more with what you were saying, that it feels like these older social platforms, one, obviously not resonating with the younger generation, but two, as more and more people get on the internet, you have to find these niche pockets where you can truly connect with others. And a lot of the time it may seem niche, but like you said, faith is certainly not niche on a global scale. One thing that really stood out to me when I was doing research for this episode is how many reviews the app has. 300,000 plus. I was scrolling through the App Store, and I just want to read you one that stood out to me, which is, when I see my little candles and how frequently my streak for prayer is, it motivates me to try more each day. And I just think that's so lovely, because it speaks to how when you create a habit and it feels like, streak, it feels like progression in a game. It really does motivate you to continue and be more engaged in the app and the community. I guess do you see reviews like this all the time? Like how does that land with you?
Well, I think you've always got two sets of people. Some people love gamification and some people inherently don't. But if it's done in the right way, and it matches the product that you've got, then people really like it. And I think it adds to that delight, that enjoyable experience. Whereas previously, I think a lot of people struggled with, say, doing a daily quiet time because they knew they should do it. But then when they got to doing it, they were struggling with the resources. They had a bit of guilt around the fact they hadn't done it the day before. And it's a bit of a weight, to get into that rhythm. Now that's only talking about some people, and some people didn't feel that. But if you put a gamified engine, it just acts as an encouragement to you to do it. It helps you do it, and gives you that bit of joy and fun as you're doing it at the same time. And that's all we're trying to do. And yeah, it's gone down really well, and people love it. And in general, people are asking for more. And I think we're only at the start. So
interesting. Okay. So should we talk about the business model? How do you think about that?
The core aspect of the business model is monetizing for the customers where they expect to be, where they expect to pay, see value there. And I think that comes down to the authenticity of what the discerning younger generation are after. Is we want a product that's fully transparent, that when you pay, you're expecting to pay for it. You know exactly what you're paying for it. And you can see the investment and time that's gone into creating that. And you also gain a huge amount of value from it. And that value should be outsized over the dollars that you put in for it. And so those are the key formations of the app, of what we're doing. We love certain parts of the app being free. We love people to be able to do their daily devotionals every day for free. But we have premium content and lots of other services that we plug in that people can that people want, and they expect to pay for them because the value that they get is so much greater than the dollars they have to spend on it. And that's always been our belief, and it's worked well for us today.
I think that one thing to unravel is how you think about the physical church experience alongside creating this virtual place for your users to convene. I think we spend so much time considering that, gaming is a force for good. And for a younger generation, when you are in Discord or Roblox, that's just hanging out with your friends where you share a common interest. And it is not even necessarily playing a game. It's just a place where we are hanging out. So fascinated to understand how you think about that balance of the physical church, the digital church. Does that glorify?
No, we are not. We're not a digital church, and that's definitely a really important tenet and founding principle that we had. The church is amazing, a huge supporter of it, but it has got a huge amount of challenges as we see denominations further fracturing. Scandals within the church are blasted over social media and exacerbated so that everyone knows about it. So the church as a whole, because it's so many different organizations, has struggled to get a huge amount of positive PR, which I think is really sad, because there's so many amazing things that's happening within it. But at the same time, it's normally the world wants to focus on the bad things, and that's what people hear about. And when often I look at the church and I look at the formation of the early church 2,000 years ago, the church was the most viral product of all time. And it happened in a physical community. There were no product managers. And that is one of the most incredible things that I think we've seen in human history, is how something just grew in and of itself because of the inherent beauty and everything that it was, that it imbued and its value. So that's the way I think of the church, and the way I think of Glorify working alongside it is, I want to help the church engage their congregation. I want to help people go to church if that's the right step for them. I want to help the church reach a wider audience. I want to work, and we do work with churches and support the church and love the church, and a lot of things that it's the church's role to talk about, that it's not Glorify's role to talk about. And I think with the younger generation, the statistics around them attending church is really negative. And I think it's the accessibility and the approachability of going onto an app and exploring faith on an app is much easier than in a church. So I almost see it as, rather than them wanting to explore and going into the four walls of a church, then that first step is likely to be Glorify, and then they go into a church at that point, even when they are ready. And there'll be some people who'll stay on Glorify, where there are some people who will go to church, but Glorify will be their community and their support and their daily practice at the time between Sunday.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned Sunday, because this was my sort of fun question for you. Sunday, traditionally, day of worship. Is that your highest day of daily active usage?
It's our lowest.
Shock.
Yeah. I think Monday through Thursday are the highest, and as you get to the weekend, I think people's routines and habits are thrown out of the window, and so Saturday and Sunday is actually our lowest. We do quite a bit to try and encourage that through gamification, getting badges of your weekend warrior badge, etc. But I think especially if people have gone to church on Sunday, then they've also don't feel the need to come on to Glorify.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, shout out Weekend Warrior badge. That seems like the one to get. So the app has really progressed. It's no longer just, the streaks, the calendar tracking tool. There's a journaling component, live exclusive Christian music. How do you think about introducing these new features to the product? Like, for example, where did the idea for live music, exclusive music come from?
Well, music's been at the core of and at the heart of Christian worship for forever. And so it's nothing new that we're doing there. But I think we are also leveraging on a huge movement that happened in the last 30 years, where Christian music went from hymns and very traditional songs to acoustic guitars, and then electric guitars, and then singers, to full stage productions and bands selling out arenas and stadiums. And that was a massive evolution that hugely helped the growth of a lot of the larger churches over the last 20, 30 years. And it's an amazing way for anyone to be able to connect and worship through music that's been updated to a modern age. That's all it is. Whereas it's just taking what hymns and the songs were, but updating it so it's parallelizing on the style of the secular world. So for us to have a music component was, and we're always getting requests to have more music, and people people love that aspect of it. It's a core part of worship, and it's something that we'll always have and always invest in and love.
I mean, I'm seeing Glorify Music Festival, come together in real life. Do you have a favorite hymn?
I adore singing hymns. So yes, Bread of Heaven, sung by the Welsh, is there's not much that's going to beat that. I Vow to Thee, if you're English, you always enjoy that hymn.
Enjoy that hymn. Also, Jerusalem is just a classic. It's up there for me. Well, we maybe will try and intro this pod with a nice hymn music. Okay, fun facts. So the app is first and foremost about getting you into good habits fast. Curious, what habits do you nurture in your life every day that you're willing to share?
Well, habits are hard, aren't they? So
they are hard.
It's not, yeah. And the problem for me is that me doing my Glorify every day is also me working. So I actually find that really difficult, because I'm always then, messaging our team going, what about this? What about this? And that's actually my time when I shouldn't be doing that. So I do always spend a bit of time of just timing myself. And I normally listen to music, or I do go on to Glorify if I'm and try not to message anyone. And then my day is, the work I find really nourishing. I find it really great, but it's also sometimes fueled on adrenaline, which isn't replenishing it very, very much. So I think it's really important to find things that replenish your soul, and nourish it as well. And work can to a certain degree, but it's can also take out if you're working really hard. So, and finding those things. And for me, being out in nature, playing sport, surf I love surfing. I've moved to LA. And so, and I surfed when I was in Africa. So I've just really, that's something that you got an hour in the water with nothing distracting you. And I find it a really replenishing and nourishing time for me. And that's really important, to get something in every day where I feel that my soul is being nourished.
Love that. And getting that quiet time. I try and swim once a week, because it is just such a meditative, quiet time. So I also have something that I've christened, as we're on the topic, staring time. So I wake up in the morning and I'll have a coffee or tea, and I just sort of take in the world slowly. And so that is the habit I'm cultivating on a daily basis, just to share back with you.
I think that's great. I got one of those lockbox phone things, and I'd put my phone in it for about an hour. Now you get 2 emergency buttons to be able to unlock it, which 2. I expected.
Choose wisely.
Yes, you only can use it twice until the thing. Then you have to buy a new one. So I thought that would last me about half an hour. But I love just staring at the ceiling, staring out of the window, bit of music on. It's so, just that's where you can process your thoughts. Because I find that when you're working really hard, there's just so much coming in. You need time for your brain just to catch up and segment everything.
I think that's true. It's just actually having thinking time, being able to think quietly. So great. We'll just love to touch on just recent progress with the company. You recently raised a Series B from SoftBank's LATAM fund. What led you to prioritize that region over Africa? How are you thinking about tackling LATAM, and when does the continent that you love so much come into play?
Well, we do have a good user base in Africa, but you're right. We put it into Portuguese was the second language we did after English, and then into Spanish. And we got so much incredible growth across Latin America that we just kept investing into it and building great relationships there and partnerships, and it just kept growing from strength to strength. And that was one of our, we had an influencer posting for us over there, and we kind of fell off our chairs when we saw the results the next day, and it felt like the whole world was coming in at over one time, crashed all the systems, and everything went down. But that was really incredibly exciting. So obviously we have a global mindset and a global view, and anyone around the world can download it, and it's around ensuring that there is education and ways for people to find out about it. And that's just how we sequence and do that is what we're always working through on a company level.
Now, everybody who's listening across the globe has heard about Glorify. So thank you, Henry, for this wonderful chat. So awesome to chat with you. And thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and enjoy staring mindlessly out the window.
I will do.